Hello and welcome to Indus News from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the headlines of this hour. At least 7 civilians, including 3 women and 2 children, have been killed in a roadside bomb blast in Afghanistan's central city of Ghazni. Officials said the incident occurred when a civilian vehicle hit with an explosive mine. No group has claimed responsibility yet. Pakistan's Foreign Office says New Delhi's remarks about occupied Jammu and Kashmir being an integral part of India is a laughable fiction. It was responding to Indian Foreign Minister's comments on the joint press release of the China-Pakistan Foreign Ministers' Strategic Dialogue. The Foreign Office said India is trying to divert the world's attention from its state terrorism in the occupied valley. It also rejected India's propaganda against the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor as false and misleading. In Belarus, tens of thousands of people have rallied in Minsk for the third week to demand President Alexander Lukashenko's resignation. They accuse Lukashenko of rigging this month's presidential election to prolong his 26-year rule. The Defense Ministry says the army will take over responsibility for the protection of the national monuments from the protesters. Meanwhile, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has accused Belarusian opposition members of seeking bloodshed. In Peru, at least 13 people have been killed and 6 others injured in a stampede at a nightclub in the capital Lima. Police say the incident occurred when over 100 partygoers attempted to escape a raid on the venue. Social gatherings are banned in the country under a curfew to curb the coronavirus outbreak. India has recorded the highest daily coronavirus deaths in the world with 912 new fatalities, while the infections have crossed 3 million. Brazil has reported 892 deaths in the past 24 hours, bringing the country's tally to over 114,000. Pakistan has registered 4 new fatalities overnight, the lowest daily death toll since March. Globally, COVID-19 has claimed more than 800,000 lives and infected over 23.2 million people. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. At least 7 civilians have been killed in a roadside bomb blast in central Afghanistan city, Ghazni. Local officials said 3 women and 2 children were amongst those who lost their lives. Officials said the incident occurred when a civilian vehicle collided with a mine. No group, including the Taliban, have claimed responsibility yet. Pakistan says New Delhi's remarks about occupied Jammu and Kashmir being an integral part of India is a laughable fiction. Responding to Indian Foreign Ministry's comments on the joint press release of the China-Pakistan Foreign Ministers' Strategic Dialogue, Pakistan's Foreign Office said India is trying to divert the world's attention from its state terrorism in the occupied valley. It also rejected India's propaganda against the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor as false and misleading. The Foreign Office called on India to implement its international obligations rather than resorting to false assertions. Early in the joint statement, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi slammed India's unilateral actions in the occupied valley. Now, political parties of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir say they will continue their struggle to undo India's unconstitutional move to scrap the region's special autonomous status. In a joint statement, parties said New Delhi's unacceptable steps disempower and challenge the basic identity of the valley's people. The parties said they will not stop until they make New Delhi's reverting Kashmiri status as it existed before 5th of August 2019. The statement said the signatories will remain committed to strive for the restoration of Article 370 and 35A and will reject any division of the state. The political alliance includes the National Conference, Congress and the People's Democratic Party, along with former Chief Ministers Farooq Abdullah and Mehbooba Mufti. Now, another Indian Defence Forces officer has committed suicide inside a camp in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Air Force personnel Inderpal Singh shot himself at an Air Force station on the outskirts of northern Jammu state. The incident raises the number of such deaths among Indian troops deployed in the occupied valley since January 2007. The Defence Ministry revealed that Indian Army of 1.2 million personnel recorded 895 suicides in the period from 2010 to 19. Another data shows more than 1,100 defence personnel from the Indian Army, Air Force and Navy committed suicide in the past decade. A former Indian Army officer said lack of discipline and poor leadership are factors behind the large number of suicides. Meanwhile, in Belarus, tens of thousands of people have rallied in Minsk for the third week to demand President Alexander Lukashenko's resignation. They accuse Lukashenko of rigging this month's presidential election to prolong his 26-year rule. The protesters flooded Independence Square in the capital, chanting slogans against Lukashenko. The Belarus army has taken over responsibility for the protection of national memorials from the protesters. Lukashenko has dismissed the possibility of holding a new vote and instructed authorities to quell unrest and secure the borders. But opposition leaders Vyacheslava Tishkonashkaya said Belarus is undergoing a change and Lukashenko will have to step down. Meanwhile, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has accused the opposition of seeking bloodshed. Moving on, the US-led international coalition troops have withdrawn from Iraq's Taji military base. In a statement, the coalition said the troops' movement is part of a long-range plan coordinated with the government of Iraq. It said Iraqi security forces will take over the garrison after finalizing the handing over the equipment and departure of the remaining coalition soldiers. The coalition said the latest move marks the 8th transfer of a coalition portion of an Iraqi base back to local forces. In recent months, indigenous militias have frequently targeted the base, hurting some of the military personnel there. Earlier this year, Iraq's parliament had voted for the departure of foreign troops from Iraq. Meanwhile, Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Khatami has vowed to prosecute and punish those involved in recent attacks on activists in the country. In a televised statement, Khatami said outlawed groups are trying to terrorize the people of Basra. He said uncontrolled weapons and tribal disputes are unacceptable. The southern city of Basra has been seen many attacks of political activists as well as violent clashes between rival tribes. Popular protests engulfed several Iraqi provinces since October last year over unemployment and corruption. Now, Iran has called on the international community to not politicize data from the black boxes recovered from the downed Ukrainian passenger plane. In a media briefing, Iran's Civil Aviation Organization chief Taraj Dehghani Zanganeh said data shows the two missiles hit the airliner 25 seconds apart. Dehghani Zanganeh also said all 176 passengers on board were still alive for some time after the impact of the first blast. The announcement is the first official report on the cockpit voice and data recordings, which were sent to France for analysis in July. Earlier in January, Iran's Revolutionary Guard shot down the plane jet shortly after it took off from Tehran. Tehran maintains the incident was an accident and has since been in talks with Ukraine and Canada over compensation for the families of the victims. Turkey is conducting air and naval military exercises in the Aegean Sea. Turkey's defense ministry says the drills will help improve the operational capability of joint interforces operations. The drills come at a time of heightened tensions between Ankara and Athens over hydrocarbon resources in the eastern Mediterranean. The regional conflict between two nations has worsened in recent weeks as both countries lay claims to the region's natural resources. Earlier, Turkey's presidential office called the discovery of vast energy reserves in the water just the beginning of Ankara's exploration programs. Moving on now, India has recorded the highest daily coronavirus deaths in the world, with 912 new fatalities, taking its death toll to over 56,700. India's COVID-19 cases have surpassed 3 million, with over 69,000 new infections in a day. Brazil has reported 892 deaths in the past 24 hours, bringing the country's tally to over 114,000. While globally, COVID-19 has claimed more than 803,000 lives and infected over 23.1 million people. More details in this report.
Governments across the world are scrambling to contain the second wave of coronavirus. Italy, once the global epicenter of the outbreak, reported nearly 1,100 new cases in a single day after months of encouraging signs of recovery. Meanwhile, South Korea has reported the highest daily rise, nearly 400 cases, since early March. The authorities said tougher social distancing rules may be needed to curb the virus spread.
현재 유행 규모와 확산 속
In order to stop the current pandemic scale and spreading speed, face-to-face meetings and contacts among people should be refrained. Therefore, we are applying the stage 2 social distancing rules nationally as of today.
In Australia, after weeks of lockdown in Victoria State, new infections and the death toll has gone significantly down. The government is optimistic if the trend continues during the next few weeks, life may begin to go back to normal.
We are confident that because of the amazing work that Victorians are doing, we will get to the other side of this, and then we can begin the really important process, that hopeful process of trying to repair, and I think succeeding in repairing the damage that this pandemic has done.
Elsewhere, South Africa has also registered a spike in cases, with most deaths reported in the tourist hotspot of Cape Town.
While in Pakistan, COVID-19 daily deaths have dropped to 4, the lowest since March. Officials say the recovery rate in the country has exceeded 93%. The Health Ministry said the active cases in the country are only above 10,000. The ministry said the death toll in the country has reached 6,235. It said just over 590 people tested positive in the past 24 hours, taking the tally to over 292,000. Sindh remains the worst-hit province with nearly 128,000 infections, while Punjab has reported over 96,000 cases. Now in Peru, at least 13 people have been killed and 6 others injured in a stampede at a nightclub in the capital Lima. Police say the incident occurred when over 100 partygoers attempted to escape a raid on the venue. They said 3 police officers were among those injured. Police have detained at least 23 partygoers. Social gatherings are banned in the country under a curfew to curb the coronavirus outbreak. Peru is now one of the worst affected countries in Latin America, with more than 576,000 cases. More than 27,000 have died of the virus so far. Now, Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has welcomed the idea of buying missiles from Iran. He was responding to Colombia's President Ivan Duque's claim that Venezuela plans to buy missiles from Iran to support armed fighters in Bogota. Speaking at a virtual cabinet meeting, Maduro asked his defense ministers to follow up the plan. Maduro also said Iran has up-to-date missile technology.
The truth is that this idea from the Colombian president is not bad. It had not occurred to me. It had not occurred to us, Padrino. It is a good idea to speak with Iran to see what short, medium and long-range missiles they have, and if it is possible, given the great relations we have with Iran, to then buy good missiles so as to reinforce aerial and territorial defenses in Venezuela.
Now, Hezbollah says it has downed an Israeli drone that violated Lebanon's airspace. In a statement, the group said the unmanned aerial vehicle was downed over Aita Ashar village near the city of Nabateh. Israel is yet to issue a statement regarding the incident in the south of Lebanon. In the past, Beirut has repeatedly complained to the UN regarding Tel Aviv's violations of the Lebanese airspace. Beirut said Israel violated Lebanese sovereignty over 370 times at the land frontier, more than 380 times at sea, and more than 250 times in the air between January and May. Now in Israel, police have detained 30 protesters as thousands gathered outside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's official residence in Jerusalem. In a statement, the security forces said 3 officers were injured in the demonstrations. Local media said despite not having a permit, protesters marched towards Balfour Street, where the Prime Minister's residence is located. Another 1,000 protesters gathered at Netanyahu's private home in the coastal town of Caesarea and chanted slogans. The summer outcry denouncing alleged corruption by Netanyahu and the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic have shown little signs of abating. Earlier this year, the Prime Minister was indicted on charges of bribery, fraud and breach of trust. Moving on, the Saudi-led coalition says it has destroyed an explosive-laden Houthi drone and a ballistic missile in Yemeni airspace. Coalition spokesperson Colonel Turki al-Malki said the missile was heading towards the Saudi city of Jazan. The Houthis are yet to issue a statement on the incident. Earlier, the coalition forces claimed to have destroyed another Houthi missile and a drone last week. Sudan's Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok Khartoum is ready to cooperate with the International Criminal Court over the Darfur war crimes case. In a televised address, Hamdok said the government will help bring the accused war criminals before the tribunal, including former President Omar al-Bashir. Hamdok also said the country is close to agreeing a peace deal with some rebel groups, with a formal announcement expected later this month. He said the country has taken significant strides to be struck off from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. Hamdok's pledge to cooperate with the International Tribunal comes after months of silence from Khartoum. Sudan's designation as a sponsor of terrorism makes it ineligible for debt relief and financing from the International Monetary Fund and World Bank. ICC indictment accuses al-Bashir, among others, of war crimes and genocide that killed more than 300,000 people. Meanwhile, a key meeting between Mali's military junta and the mediators from a West African regional bloc has ended after just 20 minutes. A delegation from 15 Asian Economic Community of West African states earlier arrived in the capital Bamako for talks. Nigeria's former president, Goodluck Jonathan, led the delegation and said President Keita was doing very well. The regional bloc has taken a hard line on the coup as it quickly shut borders and suspended financial dealings with Bamako this week. The African Union also suspended Mali's membership, whereas the US, UN and the EU have called for the restoration of the constitutional order in the country. Meanwhile, police used tear gas to disperse a group of pro-Keita protesters in the capital. The EU says it saw new hope for Libya after the country's warring sides declared a ceasefire and vowed to hold nationwide elections. In a declaration on behalf of the EU, Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell described it as a constructive first step forward. He said the ceasefire announcement demonstrates the determination of Libya's leaders to overcome the current stalemate. Borrell urged concrete actions to enable a permanent ceasefire and a relaunch of the political process. On Friday, the UN-backed government and the rival Eastern-based parliament announced a countrywide ceasefire. Both the warring sides called for parliamentary and presidential elections to be held in March next year. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Now, Moscow has denied Washington's allegations that Russia meddled in the 2016 presidential election. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova says the final volume of the report by the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee failed to present any facts and evidence. Zakharova said the report repeats claims stated in the Mueller report that Moscow wants to undermine U.S. democracy via cyber espionage. She said Russian interference is a made-up story in the course of domestic U.S. politics. The spokesperson said Moscow regrets the damage done to its ties with Washington and they warned the U.S. against spreading anti-Russia myths. Earlier, a U.S. Senate bipartisan probe concluded that Russia helped President Donald Trump's campaign. The inquiry lasted almost 3.5 years, much longer than the other investigation. Now, in the U.S., police have shot and killed another black man in the state of Louisiana. In a statement, police said the officer shot 31-year-old Tryford Pellerin when he tried to enter a convenience store with a knife. The statement said the victim was taken to a nearby hospital where he was pronounced dead, while no officers were injured during the incident. Louisiana's American Civil Liberties Union called for an investigation into what it deemed as an act of deadly police violence against a black person. Meanwhile, dozens of Black Lives Matter protesters clashed with police in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina over the weekend. Police used brutal force as it used an eye irritant to disperse the protesting crowds. Protests against police brutality and racial inequality have not let up since George Floyd's murder in police custody in May. In the US, wildfires fueled by high temperatures and ongoing lightning strikes continue to ravage California. Now, the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection has warned people as the blaze threatens capital Sacramento and San Francisco Bay Area. The wildfires have so far killed 6 people and incinerated nearly 700 buildings. Cal Fire said new fires are feared to ignite over the weekend as more lightning storms are expected. The fires that started a week ago have destroyed over 1 million acres of land. Over 14,000 firefighters have been deployed to extinguish the fires in the affected areas. Governor Newsom has urged the residents to evacuate the vulnerable places as soon as possible. Now, at least 4 people were killed and 11 others are missing in flash floods in Turkey's northern Black Sea region. In a statement, Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu says search and rescue operations are underway to find the missing. The Interior Minister confirmed one of those killed was a soldier. He said 133 citizens have been rescued so far. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has ordered the use of all state resources to repair the damage. He offered condolences to families of those who lost their lives in floods. Meanwhile, China has launched a new optical remote sensing satellite from the Jiaquan Satellite Launch Center in the country's northwest. The satellite, Gaofen 9.5, along with other 2 multifunctional satellites, was sent onto orbit by a Long March 2D carrier rocket. The remote sensing satellite will test its latest technologies, including communications, navigation, and remote sensing. The satellite will also be used to monitor the development of Belt and Road Initiative. The other satellites will carry out tests on the latest information cleaning technology for aircrafts and ships. The satellite has been designed and built by China's Academy of the Military Sciences. The launch is the 343rd mission of the Long March rocket series of China. All COVID-19 vaccines are designed for the generation of neutralizing antibodies against the novel coronavirus. Yin Weitong, CEO of Sinovac Biotech, says researchers found a kind of protein S which can activate human bodies to produce antibodies. Yin said scientists are developing 2 major types of vaccines related to the protein S. His pharmaceutical company, Sinovac, has created a vaccine which can help people develop COVID-19 antibodies within a month.
Small mutations will not affect the vaccine, and the same vaccine can deal with different epidemic strains. In fact, if there is a mutation, it will be a tiny mutation of nucleic acid, which is the mutation of the virus's RNA. But it does not mean that the virus has changed into a different type. The virus itself cannot mutate on such a big scale.
In Germany, scientists have staged a concerted experiment to study how big gatherings spread COVID-19. More details in this report.
Around 1,500 volunteers equipped with tracking gadgets attended an indoor concert in Leipzig, Germany. Researchers want to find out how cultural and sporting events can safely take place without posing a risk to the population amid the coronavirus pandemic. Volunteers were handed protective face masks, typically used in hospitals, and bottles of fluorescent hand sanitizer.
We find it important that events can happen again. If we can contribute a bit, then it's good. It's most important to get more insight so that we can come back to normality, to be able to attend concerts, sport events, just to have more leisure time.
Stefan Moritz, the head of the study, told the news conference after the concert that he was very satisfied with the discipline of the participants. He said results of the study, which is being financed by the states of Saxony and Saxony-Anhalt, were expected in 4 to 6 weeks.
Of course, we had to cut back on the fact that it is now only a third of the expected number of people. But I think we can cope with this. I think we have very good data, but not 100% of what we had hoped for. But we have a very good database and we can work with it.
Sporting events such as Liverpool's Champions League soccer match against Atletico Madrid and the Cheltenham Festival have been blamed for playing a role in spreading COVID-19. A decision to grant approval for a concert of German singer Sarah Connor with 13,000 attendees on September 4th has faced sharp criticism by virologists and local politicians.
More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Chinese video sharing app TikTok is set to file a lawsuit against the ban imposed by US President Donald Trump. TikTok's parent company ByteDance says it will challenge Trump's executive order to ensure the rule of law and fair treatment of the firm and its users. ByteDance says it has tried to engage with the Trump administration, but no breakthrough was reached. The presidential orders prohibit its transactions with ByteDance starting from mid-September. The short video sharing app has 80 million active users in the United States. In the National Basketball Association, the Los Angeles Lakers beat Portland Trail Blazers by 116 points to 108 in the opening round of their Western Conference first-round playoff series. LA's LeBron James posted 38 points, 12 rebounds and 8 assists as Lakers took a 2-1 lead in the best-of-7 series. Portland's Damian Lillard contributed 34 points and 7 assists while playing with a dislocated left index finger. Meanwhile, Thunder downed Houston Rockets 119 to 107 in their games as Oklahoma's Chris Paul hit 26 points. Elsewhere, Miami held off Indiana Pacers in a 124 to 115 points win to open up a 3-0 lead as Jimmy Butler scored a team-high 27 points. Earlier, Bucks defeated Orlando Magic by 121 points to 107, powered by Giannis Antetokounmpo's 35 points. Now it's time for the weather report. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.